The lights of the studio were blinding, the crowd roaring with anticipation as the cameras began to roll. Stephen Colbert, the sharp-witted late-night host, had built a reputation for cutting humor and biting political satire. Tonight, though, he wasn't just aiming for laughs, he had Senator John Kennedy in his crosshairs. The monologue started smoothly, full of jokes about Washington, culture, and current headlines. Then, with a mischievous grin, Colbert leaned into the camera and said, "And speaking of characters straight out of a Mark Twain novel, let's talk about John Kennedy." The crowd laughed instantly, feeding off Colbert's rhythm. He mimicked Kennedy's southern drawl, twisted his quotes into jokes, and painted him as a relic out of touch with modern America. The audience clapped, the band played a sting, and Colbert smirked up, and, for him, this was another night of comedy gold. But what Colbert didn't know was that Kennedy wasn't the kind of man to shrink back when mocked. He was sitting in the wings, invited for an interview segment that would follow the monologue. Kennedy had listened to every word, his face calm, but his eyes steady, focused. He wasn't angry, he was preparing. When it was time, Colbert greeted him on stage with exaggerated politeness. "Ladies and gentlemen, Senator John Kennedy." The audience cheered, some clapping, some snickering, ready for more laughs at his expense. Kennedy walked out slowly, confidently, shaking Colbert's hand with a grip firm enough to leave an impression. He settled into the chair opposite the host, leaning back with the quiet composure of a man who had been underestimated his whole life. Colbert launched into the first question, laced with mockery. "Senator, do you actually believe half the things you say, or is it just performance art for C-SPAN?" The crowd roared. Kennedy chuckled softly, then leaned forward, eyes locked on Colbert. "Stephen," he said in his slow, deliberate tone, "you're real good at telling jokes about people like me. But let me ask you this, when the laughing stops, what do you actually believe in? Do you believe in faith, in family, in freedom, or is it just easier to turn folks into punchlines because the truth makes us uncomfortable?" The audience quieted, surprised by the shift. Colbert, caught off guard, tried to pivot with another joke, but Kennedy didn't let go. He continued, his voice steady, his words cutting deeper than any punchline could. "You see, I come from a place where folks don't have much, but they got pride. They work hard, raise their kids, pray for tomorrow to be better than today. And when they hear you mocking me, Stephen, they don't hear you mocking a senator. They hear you mocking their struggles, their beliefs, their lives." Is that what late-night TV is about now? Turning ordinary people into the butt of a joke? The silence in the studio was deafening. The laughter had evaporated. Colbert shifted uneasily in his chair, suddenly the one under the spotlight. The audience wasn't laughing anymore, they were listening. Kennedy leaned back, calm as ever, and finished with a line that hit harder than any insult. "You got the stage, Stephen. You got the lights, the crowd, the cameras, but sometimes, all that don't add up to the truth. And the truth is when you trade respect for cheap laughs, the joke's on you." For a long moment, Colbert said nothing. The camera caught his face, visibly stunned, unsure how to recover. The audience began clapping, and not the forced applause for a joke, but genuine, steady applause for Kennedy's words. It grew louder, filling the studio until it drowned out the band. Colbert attempted to move on with his next card, but the energy was gone. Kennedy had flipped the script. The crowd wasn't there to laugh anymore, they were there to listen. The segment limped forward, but it was clear, the power dynamic had shifted, and Colbert, for once, was outmatched. When the show cut to commercial, producers scrambled, Colbert sat back in silence, and Kennedy walked off the stage with the same quiet confidence he had entered with. He didn't need to gloat. He had said what needed to be said. By the next morning, clips of the exchange went viral. Viewers across the country praised Kennedy for his composure and courage, for refusing to play the fool in someone else's comedy. Some said Colbert's show had never felt the same after that night, that the senator had walked in as the target of a joke and walked out as the man who ended the laughter on his own terms. And for millions watching, the message stuck. There comes a moment when you can either laugh along or speak up. Kennedy chose to speak up, and not just for himself, but for the people he represented. Because sometimes, The most powerful punchline in a broken bar is the truth.